Hello and welcome to the 46 Minutes of Heaven we call the D1Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Patrick Rooney. Tonight's episode brought to us by our good friends at S2 Cognition. S2 Cognition delivers a revolutionary approach to helping athletes understand how in-game decisions impact their performance from the youth levels all the way to the pros. Speaking of good decision makers, this evening, as always, joined by the great Kendall Rogers, the great Aaron Fitt, the great Joseph Broseph Healy. Gentlemen, happy Monday evening. How we doing?
Doing awesome.
All right.
Living the dream, Bruins.
Dramatic
Let's
pause.
go.
Yes.
Let's
yes.
go. It's
I
always
like
a
it.
good night when I get to see Aaron Zebediah Fitt on here.
Yes, the best. Boys, let's get to the inane banter. Let's get to it rapido. Here's my question. I'm watching the only college game on tonight on my little side screen here. Utah Tech versus Utah Valley, which has got to be some type of crazy rivalry. And it got me thinking about the most beautiful places I've visited in the United States. The answer to that would be Park City, Utah. It's just like drop dead gorgeous. So here's my question for you boys. And you can guess. Do you know how many of the 50 states, the 50 American states you've been to in person? Fitzy, how many?
49.
Whoa! What's your one?
Alaska.
What's your... Oh my gosh, Fitzy, that's like the best one.
Got to get there.
Do you have a plan of attack for Alaska?
Just waiting for whenever my wife decides to plan a trip there. I just go where I'm told, Rudes. You know this.
Oh man, you need to go there for a week and cover the Fairbanks Gold Panners.
Go to the Midnight Sun game.
Yeah, Coach Rooney's an alum. Oh my God, 49, impressive, Fitzy. Joseph?
I don't know. Oh, actually, I meant to say this first. Runes, you responded when he said Alaska, you said the best one. By what metric? I mean, no disrespect to Alaska. It's beautiful. But like, what would you say are the key metrics in making Alaska the best state?
It was my favorite summer, arguably, of my life coaching up there. It was just felt like if only place I've ever been where as a human, you feel like the visitor. It's just like untouched. They gave me a pickup truck to drive for the summer. The bumper was roped to the truck. It was
nice.
Just so that part, it was awesome. The best one.
You get extra RPI points at home in Alaska.
Seriously,
it
was so great.
I love the image of Coach Rooney driving a pickup truck, any pickup truck, but especially with one with a bumper.
I want to see you drive a pickup truck.
Yeah.
I want you to drive my truck.
Don't hold your breath.
3 big leaguers on the Gold Panners that summer. David Bush was our closer. Bobby Crosby was our shortstop until he broke his hand after a 3 strikeout evening. And then Brooks Conrad was our second sacker. So it was a good little club there.
I have to admit, I was prepared to be kind of snarky, Runes, and kind of laugh about you saying it was the best state. But you know what? That was such an earnest, like heartfelt answer that I just have to cede that, you know what? For you, given that sentimental memory, it probably is the best state. That was really, really sweet.
CEDE, by the way. Seed.
Yes.
Is that where you're going?
Yes.
Thank you. Gosh, dang it. 2 minutes in, Joseph, already making me better. Well done.
Doing my best.
How many states for you, Joseph?
I don't know. Like I have counted it up before. It's not anything close to 49. I think it's in the high 20s or low 30s. I mean, the thing about it is like, my mom and I used to go on a lot of road trips when I was a kid, and now it's not like the Northeast. I mean, the Northeast, you could take an afternoon and knock out 7 or 8 states.
Yes.
But even in the South, like we would take road trips to Florida, and depending on the route you take, I mean, you could knock out 5 or 6 just going there. So I got off to a fast start as a kid, but, and then having family that I would fly to visit every summer was also helpful. But regardless, I'm not sure the number, but it's probably about half of what Aaron's looking at.
49 that's a mic drop right out of the chute. Kendall, what say you? Do you know?
I've probably been to like 41, 42, I would say. I haven't been to like Montana. I haven't been to like North Dakota. I haven't been to Alaska. I haven't been to Hawaii yet.
North Dakota's the best one.
Yeah. I will say this. So here's my 2 cents.
That's not what my scorecard says.
The 2 most surprising states. The 2 most surprising states I've been to are Oregon and Maine. I'll say this. The first time I went to Oregon when probably like 5 or 6 years into covering college baseball, like my expectation level for Corvallis was like a 0. And like when I went there, like I loved it. Like I thought it was beautiful. Like everything was crazy green. The only thing I learned in Oregon after about an hour was that if you pump your own gas, you will get yelled at.
Yeah.
I went out there, I like got in my car, started pumping my own gas, and some like hipster looking dude like runs out of the gas station. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, like, what do you mean? What am I doing? I'm pumping my gas. He's like, we don't do that here. I'm like, dude, I'm from Texas, man. Like, we like spill our gas on the ground and nobody cares. But yeah, I love Oregon, and Maine's the other one. I have like a really soft heart for New England. Like, I love Massachusetts. Like, I love Connecticut. Like, I love all those New England states. But Maine's awesome.
You know, the thing about having your gas pumped for you is so many states, you know, are in a situation where you pump your own gas that it sounds weird to us.
Yeah.
Yet there are some states out there, shout out also to New Jersey, where you know, have someone else pump gas for you. But then if you really stop to think about it, it is actually kind of wild that most of the states are okay with allowing us to take this hose of flammable liquid and put it into our own vehicles and just trust that we're going to do it correctly and not spray it all over the place and create some sort of hazard.
That's true. But like, I'm a compassionate person, and like, I don't like having someone have to pump my, like, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like that's cheap. And like, it's kind of like going to curbside groceries, right? Like, even during COVID, it was like I'll risk getting COVID just because I don't want somebody to have to go put my groceries in my car for me. I hate that idea of like, hey, go put my groceries in the bag.
The gas pumping thing makes me uncomfortable because I always feel like I should tip them, but like that's just not how it's done. Like, you're not supposed to tip them. But I'm like, like this guy's doing me a service, but I don't know. I don't like it. I don't like it.
We'll save that topic, but like in the airport, when I buy a bottle of water at like the little kiosk and they're asking for a tip, and it's like, for a tip for what? Like, that has gotten you looked at me like it's all you did was,
the automated tip thing on the card readers, which in airports is pretty common now. Like that has gotten out of, and I'm you know. Yes. I'm okay with tipping. I consider myself I don't have the money to be an outrageously good tipper, but I consider myself a pretty good tipper and a willing tipper. But like, it's just gotten out of control that every card reader I check out on now asks me if I want a tip. And I'm with you, Rune. It's like, for what?
For who?
Yeah, I like when you go to like Chipotle now and they ask if you want a tip. Or like the other day I was at a restaurant and a lady had the 30% box already checked. I'm like, no. I'm not giving you 30%.
At least with like Chipotle, at least they provided a food service. Like, to Rune's point, he grabbed his own bottle of water, took it to the register, and they were like, what kind of tip would you like to give this cashier? And you know,
if anything, they made it harder. They wouldn't even let me hand them my card. Like, I had to do it.
And by the way, for those you watching, you can click in the right-hand corner on the top, and it gives Runes a 25% tip on his subscription.
Oh, thank you. So. Boom. Yes.
Runes, how about you, buddy? How many states have you been to?
I was pretty pleased with myself. 46. So wow. Not been to South Dakota, Idaho, Montana, or Wyoming. So that northwest corridor up there.
Wyoming. I want to go to western Wyoming, and I would love to go to Montana. Like the Missoula and all the Rockies up there are beautiful.
Yep, gotta love it. All right, boys. Shall we get to the baseball? Let's get right to our first topic. So one of the big happenings over the weekend in the Florida-Georgia series, I can't think of the home plate umpire's name, and that's really not important, but Brandon Neely, the closer for Florida, had a big punch out. It was probably a very emotional series. I'm sure it was. And whatever he did, he was animated after the strikeout, and players are really animated in 2023. I got no problem with that. And he was ejected. If I'm not mistaken, both teams had already been warned because there had been some chippiness. And I saw that the other day in a Missouri Valley game where by the first inning, the umpire had warned both the Southern Illinois pitcher, Tanner Lewis, and had warned Evansville's dugout. So, like both teams have been warned. And here's the point, guys. Like, I'm really rough on the rules committee. I'm trying to be not like chippy at everybody, but hey, we're cracking down on celebrations, and guess what we're getting more of? Taunting. So way to go. Like, that's great. Like, instead of having celebrations where we're concentrating on our teammates, now the taunting of opponents is just growing and growing. Now, are they totally related? I don't know. I might be reaching a little bit there. But here's my point of this, and I'm curious your guys' thoughts. I feel like we have officially put the umpires in an impossible situation because players are more animated than ever. Players commonly eyeball each other and scream at each other during contests. Yeah. And the umpire's job is to control the game and not let it get out of control. And so we're going to get situations like Brandon Neely getting ejected. But but I think if I was the umpires, I would say, you know what? I'm done with this. If you guys don't want us ejecting players and warning players and everyone's going to be all animated like this, have at it. We're just going to let the players get after each other, because everyone keeps telling me that players get over it quicker and players nowadays can handle it and they can control their emotions. So if that's true, and I'm being a little bit, dramatic here, if I was an umpire, I'd be like, hey, go nuts, man. You guys yell and scream at each other. I'll call balls and strikes. And if it gets out of control, coaches, knock yourself out. But I just feel like the umpires, we're telling them that, hey, like, if this thing erupts, it's on you, but you can't do anything to detonate it ahead of time. And I mean, you're asking these guys to detonate bombs in a moving car. I think it's an unfair ask of the umpires, and I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are.
I mean, I know me, if I was an umpire, like, it would have to be pretty egregious for me to throw somebody out. Now, it's one thing to give somebody a warning, but I think to throw someone out, I think it has to be very obvious. And, like, I'm going to throw an example out there. Jared Jones over the weekend for LSU. Love Jared Jones. But, like, what he said when he hit that home run, like, to me, that is a tossable offense. What Brandon Neely, from what we understand, he said, come on, let's go, and trotted off the mound. And obviously he glared at Georgia's dugout. But, I think I made this point off here a minute ago. But, like, how many closers in college baseball, like, get out of a big inning and don't glare at the other team?
Yeah.
Like
his doesn't make the top 50. Like, the Brandon Neely one was not.
That's just the way, like, closers are, well, I wasn't going to say bat, but they're crazy. Like, that's just the way they roll. So, like, to me, like, it's one thing if he was dropping F-bombs at Georgia's dugout, but it's another if he did that and went off the mound.
And I mean, I watched it and I didn't even see him look at the dugout. I saw him look maybe in the direction of home plate, which, like, you could say maybe it was toward the hitter, but I didn't see him glance toward Georgia's dugout. I don't know if I just missed it, but it looked like it was. I mean, for all I know, it could have been toward his own catcher. I mean, like, that seemed absolutely a punishment doesn't fit the crime situation, especially when you have to know. I think as an umpire, you do have to recognize that you have this power to have a player automatically suspended for 4 games. And so, like, I get it. Heat of the moment, umpires have to make snap decisions too. But, like, maybe let's try to show a little more restraint, because, like, again, okay, fine. If you want to eject a guy and he can come back and play the next day, that's one thing. But, like, if he automatically has to sit out 4 games for screaming, come on, let's go, would maybe look at the direction of the hitter. Come on, man. Like, do better.
I'm with you, Fitzy, except for, like, here's the point. Like, we're asking, the players are showing no restraint. Like, the players have never showed less restraint than they do in 2023. And that's fine. But we are asking the umpires to show restraint in this supercharged environment. I just, like, if I'm an umpire, like, I don't know what I would do, because the teams are so chippy nowadays, and that's just kind of the style of play. What do I do to control that? Like, I feel like I'd be on a hairline trigger the whole time. It just feels very, and what if I mishear a cuss word? Like, what am I supposed to be, like, reading? I don't know. It seems really, I can't imagine being an umpire in this environment.
Well, think about the overall job of an ump now. You got to keep up with pitch clocks. You got to keep up with when the batter is getting in the box and count those seconds. You've got to keep track of all that stuff. So, like, yeah, the ejection's silly, but, like, just think of all of the things we're putting on their plate in today's college baseball game. It's kind of crazy if you think about it.
And by the way, I'm in agreement with you guys. That ejection, based on the video, was not good, right? Like, I'm with you. I'm totally agreement there. Like, of all the ones we've seen, that one is tame. Like, gosh, if we could reduce the emotion down to that, I would be all in. But
dude, they'd have been, like, ejecting half of Tennessee's team every game last year.
Yeah.
If that's what we're ejecting people for.
Joe, do you have a potential solution here, or what? I don't know what to think of this.
Oh, so it's on me to come up with a solution.
Yeah.
So you guys just
do your job, Joe.
You have you have the most extensive. You have the most extensive vocabulary of anyone.
I'm gonna go get a sandwich, Joe, while you come up with a solution.
So therefore, you get to make all the decisions.
I mean, I think
you were from the least number of states, so it's on you. Sorry.
No, fair enough. No, that's only fair. That should actually be the measuring stick for everything.
Yes.
I think I'm most interested in a solution that kind of involves taking the pressure off of in the moment decisions, because I think so much of this situation comes back to, I agree with you, Runes, where as an umpire's jobs are hard. They just are, and never harder than now. When you add Kendall's point of how much they're keeping up with, and your point of the players have never been more empowered to do, to yell and gesture and all that kind of stuff, which I am all for. Like I am pro crap talking. Let me go on the record.
Love it.
But so the umpire's in a situation where he makes, right or wrong, he decides I need to step in here. I need to control this game. So he makes a decision, he does. Or even vice versa, where a player, maybe the dugout's been chirping him. The umpire doesn't have all that context. Player on the mound or in the field pops off toward a dugout, says something he shouldn't, gets tossed. So I would like to take pressure off of those types of situations and instead be able to go back and make a better determination. So Brandon Neely gets the same 4 games for what he did than if a player had MF'd someone's mother on the field or made it extra personal. Like why could there not be? Because it's not like we're getting hundreds of these a weekend, right? It's not like we'd have to sift through a whole bunch of them. Like, I don't know how many ejections happen in a given weekend, but it's got to be a relatively small number. Why can't we go back and review the footage, if you will, and say, okay, you know what? Like, maybe he deserved to get tossed there. Maybe that was, I'm not agreeing with this, but I'm just saying a reasonable person could say, you know what? Maybe in the moment, that's what needed to happen to calm that game down. We weren't on the field with the umpire. That being said, that's mild enough. Let's sit him for the midweek game and let him come back next weekend. Or maybe just say the ejection was punishment enough. Because honestly, in context, he would have pitched the 9th in that game. Because I was watching the game as this happened. He would have pitched the 9th, and then he didn't pitch the 9th. They had to go to someone else. So maybe you say, that was punishment enough. He didn't finish that game. So I think I'm most interested in solutions that involve, let's be able to like look back at it with a cooling off period and make an evaluation on suspensions or other punishments there. Because it's not like we're doing hundreds of these every weekend. I'm less interested in creating more rules, more standards, more regulations around how we have to act on the field. I think we should just let people react organically and then kind of deal with the fallout.
Yeah. I hate
Look
to
at
say
that.
this.
I did fix it.
Yeah, look at you.
You could treat it like the targeting rule in football. Like, how in football now, in college at least, in the targeting rule, there's like degrees, right? And like with this, maybe you go back and go, okay, if there's cuss word usage, maybe you get a more severe penalty. If it's just like a recurring behavior, maybe it's a stiffer penalty, something like that. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, or flagrant fouls in basketball. They go back and look at film. Like, I mean, 100%. Like, there just should be some sort of review, I feel like, at some point.
Mm-hmm. The problem is the verbal part of it. But I would say this, like, and this is going to come off a little sarcastic, but like I keep being told that players today are so good at yelling at each other and getting over it. It's the adults that can't get over it. And I do believe part of that to be true. So I almost think like the to your point, Joe, for the umpires, let's just take them out of this. If players want to yell, scream bloody murder at each other, knock yourself out and let the coaches police it. Like, it's a reflection of your team and your program. But now if we start throwing at people, like, I do want umpires to police that where someone's literally in harm's way. But if we're just screaming at each other and that's kind of the norm these days, then whatever, like umpires don't even, like, hey, you can review it later and somebody can turn it in and say, hey, this guy's completely inappropriate. I do think we have to be careful because we did have the Seth Stevenson thing last year that I bring up all the time where, he's making a run at Gabe Gross and Tim Hudson, and that could have ended very poorly. Thank God cooler heads prevailed. And then we saw the video of the junior college pitcher that, WWE'd that guy round in third that he thought showed him up. Those, I'm referencing rare exceptions, obviously, but yeah, it's interesting. It's going to be, I don't know what to do there. Go ahead, Fitzy.
I'm inclined. I think my instincts are to agree with your general premise here, Runes. I will say this. One thing that I really don't like is the lack of any appeals process, because there are times when umpires just plain screw up with this stuff. How many times have we? I think back to that ejection in Omaha with Ross Kivett. Now, like Kivett bangs his clipboard
For launching a spray chart? Is that what he was ejected? No, that
No,
was post-ejection.
that was after. That was post-ejection. Like
that was beautiful.
He hit his hand on the railing after a call, and the third base umpire from 200 feet away comes running over and tosses him. And it's like, what the hell are we doing here? Like, umpires can screw up, guys. Yeah. Like, I don't know if you've heard that, if you've been to a game lately where they screw up every pitch, apparently, if you're at any home game. But
that's true.
But the ejections, given the ramifications, the automatic suspension, hate that. Hate the automatic 4-game suspension when there's no review process whatsoever. There's no accountability for an umpire with a short fuse who tosses somebody. Sometimes they deserve it and sometimes they don't. And I hate the fact that, well, that's it. You're screwed. You're done 4 games. I hate that. Hate it.
And let's wrap it with this, Fitzy. We are at a point in the season. I would argue there's no point in the season where a 4-game suspension isn't super significant. We are officially at the point in the season where a 4-game suspension has massive ramifications. So, if we're considering ejecting people, we got to really slow our roll right now because
Florida plays South Carolina this weekend.
Yeah, like no bueno. So anyway, hey, boys, let's do another partnership. One of our new partners, Blast Baseball. If you're ready to dominate the plate or throw somebody out of a game, Blast Baseball is trusted by more MLB and college teams than any other hitting solution. The Blast sensor attaches to the knob of any bat, providing real-time feedback with every swing. Go to blastmotion.com, enter the code D1Baseball at checkout to save $10. Do not enter what Jared Jones said to the pitcher of Kentucky. That will not save you $10. Code is D1Baseball at checkout, save $10. Thanks to our friends at Blast Baseball. Really cool stuff to help hitters continue to dominate. So, boys, one more off the field issue. So we did that new recruiting calendar that you reported on, Kendall, that goes into effect April 26th, which is like coming right up. Basically, I'll try to summarize it. No, contact with recruits before August 1st of the summer, before their junior year of high school. So no more committing 7th graders, no more, arranging phone calls through third parties, no more offering scholarships through third parties, all that. The only contact you can have with a kid who's younger than August 1st after a sophomore year of high school is camps. And we know that you cannot have recruiting conversations at camps. So, I'm in favor of it. There's, I think, a couple things, and then I'll turn it over to you guys. Hey, there's no perfect answer in recruiting. Recruiting is hyper competitive. It's Wall Street for college sports. There's always going to be bad actors. There is no perfect answer. But what we had was really flawed. It did not serve any of the constituents. It was hard on families. It was hard on coaches. It didn't get us to a good place. It led us to bad decision-making, bad evaluations. It was ridiculous, quite honestly. It had spun out of control. Softball fixed this 4 years ahead of us, maybe 5, and their sport didn't cease to exist. It's gone just fine. It won't be perfect. The law of unintended consequences will certainly come into play, but I sit here pleased that we made this change. What say you guys?
Yeah. I mean, I love it. I mean, I think anybody who's followed college baseball recruiting over the last few years, and you see these 8th graders, all God be the glory and all this, hashtags and whatnot. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, I kind of put myself in the shoes of these kids, and I think back to how big of an absolute knucklehead. I'm probably still a knucklehead to an extent, but like how big of a knucklehead I was when I was in 8th grade or even 9th grade. And like, I'm trying to imagine myself at that age going, you know what, I'm going to consider Tennessee, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and LSU, and I'm going to make my college decision whenever I'm going into my ninth grade year. And like I can't even imagine that, thinking back to the way I was as a 9th grader. And so I don't like kids making the decisions back then. I mean, I guess theoretically you can still commit to a school. I mean, I guess it's kind of weird to be able to commit to a school out of scholarship, but like I guess like legacies could technically still commit to a school. But what this is going to do, guys, this is going to make it abundantly clear which schools are skirting the rules. Because if somebody has, in 2 years they have 4 or 5 kids committed that are sophomores or freshmen in high school, like how are they committed if they don't know they're going to get a scholarship offer? So I don't think it's going to totally eliminate it, but it's going to do a pretty good job of it. And that's what we needed.
I just want to quickly drop a Hank Hill comp on Kendall for I don't like all these hashtags and whatnot.
That's a great Hank Hill impersonation right there. Well done, Fitzy.
I have a question about this actually, because somebody asked me this the other day and I did
Yeah.
not have an answer. What if you are a ninth grader who's already committed to a school?
Well,
Can you,
technically, all the commitments right now are fake commitments because they're verbal
you cannot.
commitments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but
So,
like,
Aaron,
okay.
so to answer your question, starting April 26th, like a freshman that's committed can no longer talk to the coach.
Okay, that's it's an interesting dynamic there. That's all.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm
it's
fine with it,
honest.
but it's interesting dynamic.
Yeah, like I actually would have made it like a retroactive deal. Like I would have said, hey, or I guess a better term would be grandfather those people into this. The problem is like, where do you start it? Do you start with like next year's
And if you
eighth
did that,
graders?
Kendall, there'd be all this rush to commit seventh graders in the next 10 days.
Exactly.
And I'm glad they did cold turkey because it's just nonsense. Like, think about how unhealthy that is. That and I know this is competitive and all this, but like to have 13 and 14-year-old baseball players in America who are feeling down about themselves because they haven't committed to a college yet, like their travel ball teammate. I mean, think about how asinine that is.
Yeah.
And
Asinine.
thank you. Does that another Hank Hill?
Another great Hank Hill word.
Well, I'll say, hey, I will
show.
say this. I will say this about this new rule. And again, I've got plenty of friends that are in the travel ball business, but of every college recruiting coordinator I've talked to, they all love it. They're like, oh, thank God. Thank God I can like focus on like the transfer portal and, older recruits and don't have to worry about 14-year-olds anymore. The only people that have approached me that complain about this are travel ball coaches, because guess what? Like a lot of these coaches, and granted it's their livelihood. So like, I'm not bagging on them for it. Like it is what it is. But like these guys are selling these kids on a vision like, hey, come play for my 13U team in the PG Winterfest and you'll get recruited by, Johnny at Florida State. Well, like you no longer can do that because guess what? Like Josh Jordan at LSU does not care about watching a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old anymore. So like you kind of diminish that a little bit.
I agree, Kendall, but those businesses will be fine. The guys that are running, the people that are running good travel ball organizations, families will always want to be part of great organizations.
Yeah.
And, that will, all the data that these groups are capturing, all that. If you're running a good travel organization, you'll be just fine. I really believe that. And, I don't know. There's going to be challenges. We know that there's no perfect solution. But
well,
anyway.
I mean, I view travel ball like the travel ball people the way I view agents. Like the vast majority of them are pretty cool are good, but there's just a small number that aren't very good, and that's kind of how I view travel ball. I feel like people like lump travel ball all together. Like I don't do that. Like there are plenty of really good organizations out there.
Kendall, I've been talking to Fitzy about that forever, that just because people are from the Republic of East Texas, you can't just lump them all together and have one attitude towards them. You got to,
exactly.
We're using you, Kendall, as our example of empathy and sympathy and
compassion.
Compassion. That's the word.
Look at this guy.
That's right. I like it. Hey, boys, let's do this. I want to get on a positive note. So we're going to go around the conferences. And I feel like I've just been in this like critique mode. Everything coming out of Coach Rooney's mouth is too negative. So we're going to positive it up. So tonight, as we go through the leagues, I want you to share something that pumped you up. That's the expression I'm going to use. Pumped you up about the league that you saw last weekend. I'm going to start with the Southeastern Conference. And you know what pumped me up is we watched Kentucky win game 2 of that series. Not that we were rooting against LSU. Here's why it pumped me up.
All right, Pete, your mentions.
Yeah, that's right. Here's why it pumped me up, because Kentucky had their hearts broken last year. They just got hot too late, and it's a lot. There's a bunch of similar kids on this team, and that win over the way they performed in that series with LSU this weekend pumps me up for Kentucky, because I feel like if you're on the selection committee, you have to have seen that. Like that was really, I know Kentucky lost the series, but it pumped me up to watch those kids do that. What's the closer's name? Ryder Giles. Came in and got some huge outs. The kid that transferred from East Carolina. So watching Kentucky this weekend, even though they lost the series, that pumped me up because it really solidified for me that they're a real team. And I know their schedule's hellacious down the stretch, but I left this weekend really pumped up about Kentucky. Go, and anybody take it. Something that pumped you up in the SEC this weekend.
Can I go with Mississippi State's fans?
Ooh.
How about a team that has, they're playing better now the last couple of weeks, but a team that for the most part had scuffled this season. But, they host Ole Miss for Super Bulldog Week. And granted, they would have had good crowds no matter what. But to break the NCAA on-site attendance record in a year where, people were talking about firing this coach and firing that coach, our team's horrible. And to still have those kind of crowds with that kind of atmosphere. Like I was watching I think it was a Saturday game, and like it was electric. I mean, it was like it was a super regional atmosphere. And so to me, that's what pumped me up. Like that right there is what college baseball is all about. Like, hey, you know what? We're not having a great season, but we're still going to show out, and we're going to make this a special atmosphere. And guess what? I mean, you look back at the last couple of weekends, and maybe Mississippi State's starting to find its stride a little bit. They're starting to get, big hits late in the games. They're starting to get big pitches late in the games. Aaron Nixon yesterday against Ole Miss threw well out of the bullpen and closed that thing out for them. So, it's too early to say they're turning the corner, but there's signs of them maybe figuring it out a little bit, whereas Ole Miss just continues to decline.
Joe or Fitzy, something that pumped you up from the SEC this weekend?
Well, what pumped me up
Love
was
it.
Shout out Hans
That's
and
not
Franz.
Hank Hill.
Did somebody already do a Hans and Franz impression? I was not
No,
always looking at the
we
video.
did
Okay,
not.
cool.
No, nobody
All right.
did it. Nobody did the full
Pumped
one like
you
did.
up.
Yes, Dana
Um,
Carvey, whatever.
Yeah, shout out Kevin
Harvey.
Nealon. Right? Yeah, Kevin Nealon.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. He was great. Oh.
I almost just killed him because I was like, rest in peace. But I was thinking of Phil Hartman. I almost
Oh,
just
Phil
accidentally
Hartman. That
killed
was a
Kevin
loss.
Nealon.
Wow.
So I'm gonna go with Arkansas. Sound like a broken record because anybody who's listened to me on this podcast, anybody who's listened to me on Highway to Hoover's heard me say it about a million times, but their ability to just like, doesn't matter what's going on, doesn't matter what the injuries are, doesn't really matter who they're playing. They just figure it out, find a way. And their bullpen was awesome last weekend. I mean, they got a good start from Hunter Holland, and Will McIntyre was pretty solid, but they get Hagen Smith with a great outing. Gage Wood, who's just a freshman, by the way, has continued to get better and better as time has gone on. They're giving him an increasing amount of responsibility. And then Dylan Carter was excellent in the finale. And you've got other Christian Fouch is a true freshman who wasn't throwing a lot early in the season. And again, just like Gage Wood, they're starting to give him a little more responsibility. Ben Bybee too, to the same thing. And they will continue to get healthier. Brady Tygart is going to at least give it a go coming back here in the next couple of weeks. So they could theoretically get a little bit stronger on the mound as time goes on, not unlike Mississippi State. And that's been a big part of why Mississippi State's back on track. So, no Jared Wagner last weekend, right? And the offense was still good enough, against a Tennessee team, albeit a Tennessee team that's scuffling on the mound a little bit, but held Tennessee to 7 runs. That's the fewest Tennessee has scored in a series made up of 3 9-inning games since 2019. And Tennessee has not won a series in Fayetteville since 1996.
Wow.
And, they're in opposite divisions, so they're not playing every year. So that's a little bit of a rhetorical trick, but still we're talking about 27 years. So they played
do
more
better,
than a few
Berkey.
times.
Do better, Berkey. Come on.
Hall of Famer Chris Burke,
Yeah.
Chris from Louisville.
Yeah. So Arkansas just continues to plug away, and it's just impressive that they just, in the face of everything, they just kind of continue to plow forward when it would be easy if they drop some games for us to kind of go like, look, what do you want them to do? The injuries and so on and so forth. And yet they just plow forward.
That's a special team. They're like, I know these are coach cliches, but that's a team that's like bought in, connected. And I know those things come off as cliches, but not every team is wired that way. Some teams that you coach kind of act like a bunch of jackals. Like they're on their own program. They don't listen. They're not rooting for their teammates. Like not every team has great chemistry. That team clearly has great chemistry. It's fun.
Yeah, this is like a reinforcement of just how good Dave Van Horn is.
Whew.
It's like every single time you think like, oh boy, this is, they get all these injuries and you're like, oh boy, this might be the team that just kind of takes a step back naturally, and like they're right there.
So good. Fitzy?
I'm going to go with the young guns at the back of the Alabama bullpen. Huge performance. Alton Davis had a couple of saves this weekend.
Boy, that's a special arm, isn't it?
Exciting young left-hander. Pretty electric. Riley Quick also, though, I think maybe overlooked. I think 3 2/3 shutout in that rubber game. I mean, Alabama had its backs to the wall, to use another cliche, pretty early here. Now, I mean, you lost your first 4, I believe, SEC weekends. Didn't get swept in any of them, but like they needed this one, against Auburn at home. And, they found a way. They pitched well those last 2 games, and those freshmen had a lot to do with it. I do think that's something for Alabama fans to be pretty excited about.
Yep.
The Alabama is the embodiment of how we always say, just don't get swept. I mean, they haven't been great, and yet they didn't get swept. So now they win a series, and they're 6-9 in the league, and they're headed to Missouri, and Missouri's kind of frisky at home, but that's a series you would expect them to have a good chance to win. And so if they win that series, they're sitting at 8-10, and in the SEC, you're kind of cooking at that point.
Yep.
It's still a pretty tough road, but there's a path there. I feel like it was really easy to write Alabama off, especially after that Friday loss to Auburn, and look at them now. I mean, they're kind of right back in it, and they're in better shape than a lot of teams we've talked about having a path.
Yeah.
The Alabama's easy to root for because they keep not quitting. Like, I feel like I've showed less mettle following Alabama than they've showed actually, living and breathing the season. It's so you want to see those kids and those coaches rewarded because they've taken some real punches this year.
And hey, Brad Bohannon is one of the all-time great humans, certainly in our game.
Yep.
Certainly someone that I would like to have some success. And he felt like this was his best team he's had. This team was built to win. So let's see if they can make a run here down the stretch.
Bo, in 2021, when they got in a little controversially, Bo had the all-time greatest response from a coach.
Yes.
Like, every coach in the history of college sports in that situation comes off as bitter and, what are you talking about? We didn't deserve it. Like you're dumb or something, right? Bo did the opposite. He's like,
Yes.
Hey, whatever. We're thrilled, and we're certainly not going to apologize. It was so great. It was like the perfect response.
So gracious. And, because I talked to him afterwards, was like, man, like, I know we were probably something we were pretty harsh on you guys, like, for getting in. Like, it's nothing against you guys. We're just breaking down the case. He's like, oh yeah, man, I don't blame you. I get it. I get it. And, like, it's same thing. It's like so gracious. It was just a breath of fresh air.
Awesome. So awesome. Hey, boys, in the interest of time, let's do this. I'm going to assign conferences to you. Kendall, I'm going to give you the Big 12. You're going to tell me one thing that pumped you up from the Big 12's weekend. You cannot pass. Fitzy, you're going to take the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Yeah.
Joseph, you're going to take the Pac-8, as I'm calling it in my mind now. The Pac-12 you've got. And I'll take the mid-major since I had a Valley game over the weekend. Kendall, give us something positive from the Big 12 last weekend.
You want something positive from the Big 12?
You're known for your compassion. Let's go. Put it into action.
Hold on. Let me something positive.
West Virginia, easy. It's a layup.
Let's see.
The
UNC
Mountaineers.
Wilmington blew out TCU in Fort Worth. Keep an eye on Randy Hood's club. Not to do a colonial.
Don't steal my mid majors.
Okay, I won't steal your mid major, but keep an eye on UCW. They're pretty pesky. They got a pretty good offense, and they're red hot. I think they're 10-2, 10-3 in the Colonial right now. But TCU had a rough weekend. But I think the two things that stood out to me was Kansas State's offense against Kansas. Kansas, we had talked about last weekend, took that series from West Virginia. We did the D1 Jinx. We wrote like a big story about how they're turning the corner with Fitz. And then all of a sudden, Kansas State rolls into Lawrence and blows them out, sweeps them. So Kansas State's offense, Brady Day had a big weekend. Cash Ridgely's a really nice hitter. Nick Goodwin's obviously a really talented player. And I think the other team for me, guys, and like I get they're 5-10 in the Big 12, but like Mitch Thompson is literally getting the absolute most out of Baylor. Like he's like the dude who has like the orange on the juicer, and like there's just like little drops coming out, but like it's just constantly coming out. Like he is getting that out of Baylor. Like that, there's no way that team should be remotely competitive. And I'm not like bagging on the roster. Like I guess I kind of am, but like when you look at Baylor overall, like there's no reason why they should be in some of these series. And like they almost won that Texas series. Like they had a legitimate shot. They had a tying run, I think it's second base in the ninth inning, and LeBaron Johnson ended up shutting the door on them. But like I give them a lot of credit. I watched that Sunday game. Mm-hmm. They're pesky. Hunter Toplansky's a really nice hitter. They're not bad. And so I give credit to Mitch's staff. They've done a really, really nice job with a depleted roster.
Hey, Baylor is like the cautionary tale for coaching transitions because, they don't always go like Andy Stankiewicz going to USC, right? Like sometimes it's Baylor and all the good players bolt while you're looking for your new coach. And then, someone like Mitch Thompson has to just, like this is going to be not a quick rebuild. It doesn't appear. And you're right, Kendall, those kids and those coaches are really fighting. Like that's impressive given all the transition and the exodus that they experienced.
Well, I think I'll say this about Mitch, and I think what really helps him is like being a former junior college coach nearby. Like he knows how to do it a little bit in an unorthodox fashion, and I think he knows like what clicked for them at Baylor before, and so I think he's doing a really good job. I think he's going to be able to recruit there, and I'm not saying he's going to be able to out recruit Texas and Texas A&M when they go to the SEC and out recruit LSU when they're in the state of Texas. Like I think he's going to get enough kids to get that program, back on track and at least in the hunt for regionals. Like if Baylor can get in the hunt for regionals, I think you're happy.
Yep. We're all betting on Mitch Thompson for sure.
Yeah.
Fitzy, how about the Atlantic Coast Conference? What pumped you up about that league last weekend?
I'm going to give you the two. So I saw two series this weekend. I saw Miami at North Carolina, and I saw Florida State at NC State. And I was certainly impressed with what I saw from Miami. Their character. I really like the makeup of that team. And they of course they're Miami and they play with a little chippiness or whatever here or there. But I actually kind of liked it. Like they gave me a hard time, the players on the field after for picking against them. Oh, Aaron, you got that one wrong. And I'm like, hey, but it's all in good fun. And it's like you could tell that these kids, they seem like they've got a little bit of togetherness, and really like the I don't know. I kind of like the whole vibe, the whole cut of their jib. They're depleted in the mound. They didn't have Carson Ligon. They just kind of pieced it together. They really they went all in to win the middle game. They had a chance to clinch the series. You think, all right, we're going to give the ball to Walters and just kind of try to ride it out. And, Walters, they wind up, he pitches 2 great innings and then gives them a home run to tie it. And the game keeps going and then they get walked off. And it's like, wow, man, that could have been, it was a gut punch loss. And then they come back and play an hour later and they played a really good, tight, sharp game. And it was impressive, it was, again, especially as they'd already used their big bullpen guy, Gallo, who had given up the walk-off home run. An hour later, he's back on the mound starting. He just had to do what they had to do to try to make it work. And then it did, they won that game. So kudos to Miami. But also, NC State. I mean, how many times in a row on this podcast have I said NC State, I'm buying, let's go. They're going to make a second half run. I'm telling you guys. You got people in the chat every week being like, oh, is it time to push the panic button on NC State? And I'm like, no, you guys are crazy. This team's, they got a really good roster. I mean, their position player group is elite for me. I mean, I really it's the, I love talking to Eli Serrano after the game on Sunday because, they're so good in the top half of the lineup, but then you look at the bottom half of the lineup with Serrano and Parker Nolan and, Peyton Green down there and Kalai Harrison. I mean, Serrano had a great quote. He's like, yeah, we call ourselves the bottom feeders, because
nice.
Yeah, sure, the top half lineup can get you, but so can the bottom, and I love that. I love that. But they're super deep. The length of that lineup, the guys off the bench, when you got a Carter Trice and a Dom Palali coming off the bench.
Oh, wow.
It's just they're super, super deep. I think the pitching is good enough. That was kind of the question mark at the end of the year. Do they have the arms? The rotation is solid. I mean, it's not like they're the star power that Wake Forest has, but other than Wake Forest, they're probably the most stable rotation in that league. I mean, it's just 3 guys that go out there. I mean, the freshman Fritton is exciting. He's a future star, maybe already a current star. He's got that kind of like James Talon, that vertical approach angle thing. He just comes at you with a ton of fastballs and it plays up. But I mean, Whitaker and Willardson are just pitchability veteran righties that really good feel for their off-speed stuff, and they get you 6-7 innings most weeks. And bullpen has been a little question mark, but I don't, I kind of like their bullpen. I mean, it's not elite, but I like that they've got veterans like Sam Highfill and Justin Lawson back there, and a couple of lefties. I'm a big Rio Britton fan that they got from Oregon. And John Moralia does his job, good matchup guy. I mean, I think there's enough. Those 4 guys, I'll build a bullpen on those guys. Maybe it's not going to blow you away. There's not an Andrew Walters back there, but I think the bullpen will be good enough down the stretch for them. I think, they just swept Florida State as they should. Florida State's not good, which is wild, but they're just really not good. I mean, and they competed hard this weekend. Credit to Florida State, that team. They're 4-14 in the league. They got blown out on Friday night. They didn't quit, and they really fought hard the next 2 days. Could have won both those games, still didn't. Like, had their guts ripped out. I feel for all those guys, because it's that's heavy stuff when you've got a 44-year regional streak, and it's almost certainly going to end this year.
Can't even imagine.
That's like, it's tough. That's tough for those guys to wear. Like the tradition of the program matters so much, and we'll see if they can make any kind of rally down the stretch, because I mean, they do have some good players. They're not like, talent wise, they're not like outclassed out there, but it's just, man, it's just been tough for them. So anyway, that's a rambling non-answer, I guess, but that's what I got.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. That Miami North Carolina series was one of the series of the weekend. That was really compelling. Yeah. Joseph, who do we give you? The Pacific 12?
Indeed.
Yeah. What do you have the Pac-12 network, I've been told.
I do. Yep. I heard they're up to 15 subscribers this week. So
and you're wearing your Oilers sweatshirt. Look at you. You're very.
Right, yeah.
Do you have a favorite all-time Oiler? Haywood Jeffries, maybe?
Oh,
Ernest Givens.
If it's not
Chris Dishman.
Chris Dishman's a good
answer. Maybe Warren Moon.
That's too obvious.
Warren.
Yeah, good. It actually is Warren Moon. I went to a couple of Oilers games when Warren Moon was there, kind of at the tail end of his career, and I was really too young to remember them, but I'm told I was there. I should have said Al Del Greco, the kicker.
Nice.
That was because you
should have said Earl Dylan Campbell. So you should have said.
Well, it's before. I feel like I can't really claim him in that way. But one of the games that I do remember going to of the Oilers in the Astrodome was they're playing the Bengals, and of course the Bengals were awful. And the final score was something like 12-9 with nothing but field goals. So I was just really got to see a kicking exhibition.
Burner.
Chris Chandler, I think, was the quarterback at that point.
Nice.
Who was the running back they had back in '93? Who
Lorenzo White?
Lorenzo White, yeah.
Good pull, Fitzy.
Listen, if any of these guys played in Tecmo Super Bowl, I can tell you who they are.
That's great.
My mom was a big Billy White Shoes Johnson fan. That was her.
Billy White.
Widener University, suburban Philly. Thank you. Chester, PA.
Yeah. We should do an Oilers podcast on the side.
Yes, we should.
We really should.
and we start out by you singing the song.
That's right. Yeah. Houston Oilers. Houston Oilers. Yeah.
We have lost it. All right, Joe, save us with the Pac-12, please.
Going to the state of Oregon. Good weekend for both Oregon and Oregon State. Oregon with a series win over Stanford. Oregon State sweeping USC, and I'll focus more on the Oregon State side of it because it felt like a classic Oregon State kind of weekend where they had some offensive pieces here and there do some things. It was a good weekend for Garrett Forrester, which I think was big, but they really pitched the crap out of it. And I don't think I've fully internalized, certainly not, how good of a year Trent Sellers is having for them in the rotation. 74 strikeouts in 43 and 2/3 innings.
Wow.
Just a ton of swing and miss there that, again, I don't think I really realized. And Jacob Komatz is having a pretty nice year. He's not the same type of dominant as what Trent Sellers is doing, but then the bullpen can just throw numbers at you, right? Like, I think we know Ryan Brown, but AJ Hutchinson and Tyler Mejia and AJ Lattery and Ian Lawson and Ben Ferrer is getting better and kind of coming along and getting back to being the Ben Ferrer that we know he can be. And so it just feels very typical Oregon State, where it's, you never know what you're going to get from the lineup on day to day. And I don't just mean that from a production standpoint. It is also classic Oregon State, where you don't know what the 9 names are going to be on the starting lineup in a given day. They like to mix and match and use different guys. And they have situations where a guy who hasn't played in 5 weeks will suddenly be in the starting lineup and get 3 starts on a weekend just because they're working on a hunch or a matchup or something like that. And so feels like a team that, look, I mean, they were 1-5 after 2 weeks in the Pac-12. They're 10-8 now. So I'm not great at math. That's 9-3 in their last 12 Pac-12 games.
4 straight
feels
series,
feels like they're coming on, and not just that they're playing well, although they are obviously, but also that they're doing it in a way that feels pretty familiar and against pretty good competition, right? I mean, those series are USC, Oregon, Washington, and okay, Cal's having a tough year, but this wasn't Utah and Arizona and Cal and all the teams that are really scuffling right now. They've played some good teams and they're just taking care of business.
Can I chime in real quick?
Please.
This Trent Sellers thing is wild to me because, I saw them play 18 innings against Gonzaga in the fall, and they probably used 16 pitchers or something. And I broke down the whole roster with Mitch Canham, and my fall report had 18 different pitchers mentioned, and Trent Sellers was not one of them.
Whoa.
And it's like, this guy was like totally not on my radar whatsoever. And like, it didn't really seem like he was on Mitch's radar because he didn't mention him among 18 pitchers, and he's their best guy and he's freaking dominant. It's just wild how they find these guys. It seems like every year they find some guy and it's like, who the heck is this guy? Like, really, this Ben Ferrer? Like, he's an All-American now, yeah. Like USC Upstate guy who like didn't ever quite put it together. I mean, it's just amazing. It's just in their DNA over there.
Sellers is the NCAA transfer, however you say it, Lewis and Clark State, right?
Yep.
The old F-Chef program. Yep. That's awesome. Really cool. Boys, let's do the mid-majors and then we'll wrap. So this is cool. So Scott Gustafson, who is the coordinating producer for college baseball at ESPN, good friend of all of ours. Yeah. We see him in Omaha every year. Gus, as he's called, New England Patriots season ticket holder, which, is important to one of us.
The pride of Marshfield, Mass.
Oh, there you go. Even better. Marshfield? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Excellent. So
I didn't think Aaron was claiming the Patriots still.
Well, I don't. But
good question.
Gus does.
That's a great call out, Kendall. Zing. Hey, so Gus sent out an email today that said, "Hey, who are four mid majors that you think can do damage in the NCAA tournament?" And so that really got my brain cooking. So you guys. We talked about this a couple weeks ago where Omaha has been dominated by teams from the Power Four, meaning, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and SEC. So I'm going to ask you guys a quiz question, then I'll get to my point. Over the last 6 NCAA tournaments in baseball, there are 16 teams who advance to super regionals every year. So of the 16, on average, how many of them are not from the Big 12 or the Pac-12 or the ACC or the SEC? So my question is, say it again, Fitzy.
5 years or last 6 years?
6 years, last 6 seasons. So take a guess. So each year we've got how many from those Big 4 conferences and how many of the 16 come not from there?
I've got 2 total.
2 is, you're saying 2 per year is what you're saying, Fitzy?
No, I'm saying 2 total for those 6 years. I'm probably way light.
Way light. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're talking hosts. I'm sorry.
No. We're talking just advanced to super regionals.
Oh, I thought you meant Omaha. My bad.
No. Advanced to super regionals. Yeah. So think about 16 teams advance to supers every year. How many are we averaging that aren't from the Power Four? Joseph, what do you say?
Oh, I'll say the average is 4.6.
Fitzy?
I just want to say this was a disgraceful display of listening.
Nobody listening.
I felt like my clarity was at least average, but Fitzy made me feel like I was.
It's the 52-minute mark. My eyes are glazing over.
Yes. Too much cough syrup.
Joe's guess is pretty good. I'm gonna say 3.6.
Kendall?
5.2.
$1. Oh.
No, yeah, well done. So the answer is 3.3. So it's about 3 per year, which is a pretty low number when you think about it. I mean, 4 leagues are accounting for 13 spots in supers every year. But here's my point, boys. When you think about this year, it's a good list. Like, I just feel like there's really – so here's 8 that I gave Gus right off the top. Campbell, Coastal, Connecticut, UTSA, DBU, East Carolina, Indiana State, Southern Miss. I mean, all 8 of those teams are really legit. And then, I started pouring into some of the leagues that, are not as easy for a conversation like this. But, Maine is 11-1 in the America East. Sam Houston is 14-4 in the WAC. Loyola Marymount is 12-3 in the WCC. Yeah. Oral Roberts is 12-0 in the Summit. I mean, they're plucky. Army's 12-2 in the Patriot, and it'll be their 5th straight NCAA tournament if they sneak in there. Central Connecticut State 16-2 in league play. Southeastern Missouri State 10-2, San Jose State's 11-4. You go all around.
Elon.
Hey, Elon, the Colonial, just as a league, would be a nightmare to show up in your regional. Elon, UNCW. We mentioned UConn, but Xavier's having a great year. Kent State. I want to bring this up about. You guys know I had a Valley game last weekend. I have a Valley game coming up this weekend. So this weekend I've got Indiana State and Southern Illinois, and these two programs are really good college baseball programs, and it makes me more fired up about 72 teams in the NCAA tournament. It makes me more fired up about 32 hosts. I mean, both of these teams have good facilities that could host a 3-game series. I'm telling you guys, Southern Illinois got good players, a bunch of fifth-year seniors. Like you've said it, Joe, physical hitters. They've got a type. They play slow defensively. Like they don't make a bunch of errors. They've got just enough arms. Indiana State's 5th in the country in fielding percentage, because they always are. Mitch Hanna's teams always play outstanding defense. I'm super fired up for this series this weekend. And you know what? Here's the thing. Indiana State, you mentioned this last week, Kendall. If Indiana State doesn't win the Valley tournament and they keep playing the way they are, the Valley will get 2 teams in this year. Like Indiana State is their trump card there. So anyway, I got myself really pumped up about the mid-majors this year in college baseball, because there's a lot of good ones, and there's a lot that they feel even more dangerous than usual to me. Am I sniffing glue, or do you guys get the same sense?
Yeah, I think what stands out to me is it's a pretty wide, diverse group of teams we're talking about. It's not that some years it feels like there are certain leagues, like last year with the Sun Belt, right? An overrepresentative number of the mid-majors we thought highly of came from the Sun Belt. And this year feels like a little more spread out. And I will throw a particular note out there. Aaron mentioned Elon, and I think they're interesting because I think so often the archetype of the mid-major that can cause some problems is a team that can really swing it. And I think, especially in today's college baseball, mid-majors that can do that are kind of a dime a dozen, and typically run into trouble when they face the higher velocity, high-end arms. Elon is kind of flips that script where they've got arms and they've got some depth there. I mean, Shea Sprague is like a super pitchability lefty who flummoxed Kentucky on opening day. And they've got 2 freshmen, Justin Mitrovic and Ryan Sprock, who are both look like, small samples that I saw of them opening weekend, but both look like they could be pros down the road. They've got a closer in Ben Simon, who's definitely a pro. They've got a couple relievers, Liam DeBajian and Joe Savino, who are putting up good numbers. And so a mid-major who can pitch like that, now they'd have to do it against elite offenses. That's the trick, but that's a little different. Typically we see the opposite, where you've got a mid-major that wants to come in there and score a bunch of runs. And that's hard to do when they start to face an SEC or an ACC or a Big 12 club with big time arms. I'm more interested in the opposite. Whereas, hey, if you've got some pitching that can slow down those opposing offenses, I think you're a little bit more in business, especially in a regional.
And that was Southern Miss last year. I mean, it was elite pitching, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this year for me, the teams that fit that kind of Southern Miss of last year mold are East Carolina, which, whatever.
That rotation.
Year, their pitching feels like it's I don't want to get carried away because they've had some darn good pitching staffs over the years. This might be the best staff of the Cliff Godwin era. I really like the rotation, especially, but also the bullpen. I mean, they've got plenty of guys there, and again, they can mix and match. They're deep. East Carolina and Dallas Baptist. Dallas Baptist, I think, is a real pitching staff. Again, really good rotation, and even better the bullpen. It's an elite bullpen. Those 2 teams feel like, how many times have we said it? Best programs that have never gotten to Omaha. I think it's East Carolina and Dallas Baptist 1-2, right? I think that's maybe not really up for debate, unless I'm totally whiffing on somebody. This feels like maybe they could both get there. I really am high on both these teams.
Yep.
Yeah, can I just mention UTSA as well? I mean, we talk about a team that has enough arms. I mean, they've got a pretty good offense with Josh Killeen and guys like that. But, I mean, pitching-wise, I mean, they might have the best closer in college baseball, and Simon Miller. It's up to 95. It's a wipeout, 89, 90-mile-an-hour cutter. They've got a really good Friday guy, Luke Malone. I still kind of wonder about the rest of the rotation a little bit in a regional. But I tell you what, they are not a team I want in a super regional. Like they can match up with you really well. And the thing about Simon Miller too is like I saw him against Rice go like 4 2/3, and the dude was holding his velocity. So if they get in a super, they can legitimately just go out there and start him in a game, and he'd probably be able to go the distance. Because I mean, he's gone 4 or 5 innings before.
I'm with you guys. Pitching is the elixir, if I could use Joe's word, right? It's like, think about the Big West teams that went from 14 to 17. They all pitched. They all really, really pitched. And so totally with you. Boys, well done. Want to mention one more thing before we wrap up. Get yourself a subscription to D1Baseball.com as we head down the stretch run here. Use the code SAVE23 at checkout and get 20% off. If you type in Kurt Reed, I'm sure something good will happen, but your safer bet is to type in SAVE23 at checkout and get 20% off.
Great callback. Great callback.
+9 on the what is this? The nonsense tracker.
Also, I mean,
dropping a Kurt Reed.
Pro sneaking in the house ad at the buzzer. Like, well done.
Oh, just channeling
go ahead, speaking of
Joe.
Kurt Reed, I asked a question into this week's chat. It did not get answered. I asked if you guys had more information on Kurt Reed, I sent that question into the D1 Baseball Weekly chat, and it was not answered. And frankly, I would like my money back for my subscription.
Deleted it.
Who are you in the chat? Are you Joe from Durham? Are you Joe from Lufkin? Who are you?
I think
Joe
I just
would
put
be
Joe.
that obvious.
I think I just put Joe.
Lufkin.
Joe from
I used my own name, but yeah.
Joe from Central Illinois.
I just kind of wanted to know. Like, I wasn't ashamed of it. I was going to put my own name on it. I was just curious.
Gosh. Joe, that is.
Were you the one who asked me in the chat why Mississippi State isn't ranked?
No, this is the first time I've infiltrated.
That was a
the
legitimate
chat,
question, by the way.
Yeah.
Hey, boys, let's end on this. Our good friend Chris Burke, Chris from Louisville, was inducted into the Tennessee Athletics Hall of Fame this weekend, which is really cool. You guys have heard me say, arguably the best player I ever got to coach against. I got to coach against Berkey his junior year when it was just bonkers, 20 home runs, 50 steals, 2001 SEC Player of the Year. So we love Berkey. Congrats. What a great honor at a school like that. You're in the same Hall of Fame as Todd Helton and Peyton Manning, and just a remarkable set of athletes.
Yeah, really remarkable. And by the way, Runes, I did hear, I saw on Twitter that Berkey did. This is shocking, guys. This is really shocking. Berkey apparently spoke beyond the time limit, so he just kept talking.
He's got something to say.
I know that will shock all of us, but he just kept talking.
Did they start playing the music? Like Rocky Top starts playing over the loudspeaker?
That's great. All right, we'll be back here Wednesday night for the weekend preview. We'll talk about how the Rune Dogs are faring in the standings. #tied for 8th place. That's it. We'll catch you next time on the D1 Baseball Podcast.